Hello and welcome to the Patient First Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bryan Laskin, and today I'm excited to have the previous co-host of this podcast with me, Mr. David Pryor. How are you doing, sir?
Good, Brian. How are you?
I'm great. It's good to see you.
You too.
On the podcast. We've seen each other quite a bit, but it's been a long time since we've
It's been a couple of years now.
podcasted. Really, 2 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I have less hair on my head since the last time we did this.
I don't know about less hair, but it's certainly grayer.
No, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, thanks. Thank you. Well, you've got to tell the audience kind of what you've been up to in the industry.
Well, since you sold off Opera DDS, I've gone on to Vine Dental for about a year, helped with the transition of Opera DDS into the Vine environment, and now I'm over at Planet DDS, and I'm the apteryx expert selling to the DSO space.
In the dental imaging space, which is very cool, very
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah. So it's been 2 years. So I just recorded my podcast where I did my kind of my wins and my fails when it comes to predictions for 2023 and where things are going in 2024. So this was unprompted. We haven't discussed this before.
No.
So let's see how
As usual.
yeah. You're blank slate, right?
Yep. Blank slate.
Magic ingredient is here again to give us his predictions for 2024. Where do you think things are going, my friend?
Where do I think things are going? Well, I think 2023 certainly was the year that it was all AI all the time. And so, being on the imaging side for the Planet DDS environment, that's every conference I went to that came up consistently. And it reminded me back in the day when the PC was first getting a lot of popularity. I was selling computers, and people would come in saying, I need to get a computer. I don't know why. I just know I need it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel a lot of the same energy around AI, where people are like, I need AI. I know it's something that is important, and I don't know how it's going to help me. And so there is a lot behind. Now, how do we implement AI? What is the actual workflow in a dental practice of how AI is going to work out? So for me, I think that 2023 was a year where people were taking a look at AI, trying to get a better understanding of AI, and now 2024 is going to be implementation year.
My number one prediction, the year of AI explosion,
Well,
right? And I think both from the implementation, but then also the use cases where I don't think that AI is going to be, right now people think of AI companies in dentistry. Let's face it, every technology and company in dentistry is going to have AI components.
yeah,
right?
for sure.
And that was my number one prediction, my friend. So
Well,
so we are well aligned.
which is often accidentally the case. I don't think. I think.
I don't think we are aligned very often, my friends,
No,
watching this.
I think in large part on the bigger issues we are.
Okay,
I think
that's fair.
I think when it comes to the minutia of the day to day,
I'm right and you're wrong. Yeah.
You are.
Oh, I'm sorry, I cut you off.
You're the worst.
Oh, okay.
No, it's I think with the big picture stuff we align quite often, and certainly what I've seen in the big decision stuff that you make predictions on, they come to fruition. And so it's always been my opinion, hitch my wagon to Laskin Star because it seems to make a lot of sense most of the time. So,
Well, I had some fails last year.
well, let's hear about those success. I missed that. So tell me a couple of the successes and the failures.
Well, the big failure I had was I felt that the COVID-19 infection control protocols would be not 100% long lasting, but I thought I would think that through 2023 there would be less of a regression back to 2019 infection control protocols. So that piece I failed on. I was like, these infection control protocols, I felt like the 80s with the AIDS epidemic, which led to a leveling up in infection control. This isn't a judgment right or wrong, but things have if they haven't backslid 100%, they've backslid 98.5% to 2019 levels. So that was the prediction that I made, that I went, well, I missed that one because I would not have thought that the world would pretend that there wasn't just a global pandemic when they go to the dental practice.
I will tell you where one of the big things that I've seen that before 20 before COVID and after COVID, a general trend, and certainly from where I came from in the Opera DDS world when we were selling the online forms. When we first started selling online forms and I would talk to practices, they, the common phrase would be, our doctor just loves paper. We're never getting away from paper. And now I think it is by far the standard where practices have moved to an online form situation. So that point of infection is gone.
So good point that there is definitely the pandemic had a compression in timeline. So trends, you could, I mean, I don't think that I feel like dental practices, regardless of the pandemic, would be using paperless forms. It just took a lot less time for everybody to get on board,
Yep.
right? The I guess so. You're right that that has definitely stuck. The part of the infection control that I'm thinking of is the extra gowns and masks and there's the heightened awareness of infection control protocols. Even something as simple as, and maybe this has changed to some degree, but when a staff member or a team member is sick, not having them not come to the office,
Yeah.
right? I don't feel like that's probably stuck around as much as I would have thought. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. I think there's, and I think all your listeners will widely agree, there's a need for hiring in across the industry, and there's a real shortage in qualified help, and it it really becomes a difficult choice for a lot of practices, especially smaller practice where one employee's missing. That's a big, big, big component. So I get it. I get how that occurs for sure.
Well, that was my one of my another prediction that I got right was that the staffing shortage, the inavailability of qualified team members was not was not a flash in the pan. That was going to be a lasting trend that's with us for quite some time.
Yeah.
Certainly throughout 2023, probably throughout 2024, right?
I would bet all your money on it.
Yeah, and it's all my money. Thanks. It took me a second. But even look to things like dental lab technicians. I mean, that's in crisis right now from the
Yeah.
number of people, just the lack of availability of talented lab technicians and technology, I believe, is coming in to fill that void already, right?
Yeah.
And will continue to do so. In fact, that wasn't a trend that I said for 2024, but I would say that that's true. That technology will be leveraged to automate tasks to replace team members.
Without question.
Yeah,
There's no choice.
yeah.
So it
There's a
that
choice to do less.
yeah, do less,
Yeah.
right? But that has not been a trend in the
No.
industry, right? So it's this is a minute by minute and second by second industry, and it's a I'm sure for a lot of people it can feel like a hamster wheel,
Yeah.
and it's if there's a technology that can start removing some of these issues, then that's something that certainly when I've talked to practices, it really makes an impact. So, what were some of the other things that you won on? What were the winners of
The winners.
2023?
Well, I don't have my notes in front of me, but DSO consolidation. I felt like DSOs were going to have a rapid rate of growth post pandemic, or actually because they would be practice valuations would be more reasonable and would be growing more. Now that was true in 2023 and 2024. I think that they're not going to be there's not going to be as much consolidation because of interest rates and where things are going.
Mm.
But my prediction for 2024, and this I'd love to hear your perspective on this, is because having a prediction in 2024 that large groups, and we've both made this transition from when we worked together at Opera,
Mm.
that we're both went from kind of talking to single dental practices where now we're both talking to like a lot of large groups,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So, which is kind of appropriate because now there's a lot more large groups. It's growing at even faster rate than I had predicted, right?
Yeah.
So one of my predictions is that in 2024, because there's not the sort of cheap money available to buy practices and aggregate and sell at a higher multiple,
Hmm.
right? There, which is kind of the traditional DSO model.
Sure.
There's this focus on growing the profitability within an individual dental practice, which is not the same as aggregating practice. It's a totally different business. So my prediction, I'm telling you actually the reasoning behind my prediction
Okay.
is that DSOs that are led by dentists, or at least have dentists that have a history of being able to successfully grow a dental practice, will have a much better, higher rate of growth than those not. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
if you have dentists, clinical leadership who has a history of growing dental practices, this is a more controversial one because I think people who came from another industry running a DSO think I know the answer to this business. I think a dental practice, and you know me, I talk to all different business. I'm in business work groups, leadership work groups all the time with people from all industries. However, I do think there's something unique about growing a dental practice that's different than growing, you know, a large chain of restaurants, for example.
Sure.
And so having at least in the leadership position, having particularly a dentist who has grown successful dental practices in a key role on a leadership team, which is not true of a lot of organizations. The ones that do will have a higher rate of growth than those that don't, which is I think relatively new to the DSO industry.
I think fundamentally, I think that because your dentist doesn't put you at a disadvantage in growing a dental practice, I think it puts you at a great advantage. I think, however, there are lots of opportunities for a DSO when they have, you have a chief clinical officer, you have a chief dental officer, you have somebody that is in the C suite that has a dental background that is going to be pushing an agenda oftentimes. If you're just looking at dentistry as a business and you're just trying to churn it out and grow for growth's sake, yeah, I think you're going to struggle. I think that the thing about dentistry is that I've seen it, especially from a dentist, they look at it from a couple different perspectives. They don't just look at it from trying to grow the business. They look at it from a patient care perspective that often doesn't get equated in the bottom line from the financial side, for example. And so, in my opinion, what I've seen is you've got all these dentists that are involved in DSOs and they're really, really passionate about the patient care and they push that agenda forward. So when you have that, you have the patient mindset that you're thinking about. So the customer mindset, how can I make the customer happy? That's that's where I think you've got a really good point in that dentists take a look at the picture holistically
Mhm.
of what really drives a dental practice, and the big part of that is making the patient happy in the chair.
Yes, and I mean, you maybe a little bit more eloquently stated the same thing as me,
Yeah.
but would you also agree that that's a change in the marketplace right now? That wasn't true in 2022. Now, it wasn't like the practices, the DSOs that grew the fastest were not like dentist led, focusing on the patient experience, making sure that each practice grew individually, and and now they have to be.
Well, money was cheap.
That's my point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're 100%.
yeah.
So, I mean, now you just buy a bunch of practices and just keep adding to the fold, or build them from scratch. Either way, your money was cheap, and you could grow those businesses out of hand. And now they have to be more thoughtful. So, to your point, yeah, I agree in a lot of ways that there is an advantage when you're listening at a minimum to the clinical side and where they're driving the direction of the business.
Well, and I'm arguably biased, or not arguably, I am biased because I feel that there's not as I go to meet. I mean, we go to these meetings. I've seen many of them in the last couple of years, where there's large groups, and many times I'm the only dentist in the room,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And that's new to me over the last couple of years. And I've talked about it on this podcast before. Great, well-meaning people have the patient's perspective that are really trying to do innovative, cool things in dentistry with practices. However, kind of the call to arms that I have for them is that I do think you're missing something if you don't have a dentist that knows how to grow a dental practice on your like in a because there's a lot of dentists on leadership teams or chief dental officer where it's like, yeah, you're the guy that picks out which GUI we use, right? They're not core to the business because they're like, yeah, all that, they're always talking about patient care and they're going to rise the cost of things, right?
Yeah.
That rising of the cost of things could be also the thing that disproportionately grows your profitability, right? Just cutting to the lowest cost, I've seen it, or selling something for $20 in a practice where you could be doing $20,000 treatment plans, right? Getting a Having a dentist and listening to that dental team, not just from a clinical perspective, but from a how do you take that clinical perspective, putting patients first, the patient experience, how do we leverage that to grow the practice? And that's not something you learn from aggregating practices. It's fundamentally different.
Yeah. No, I like you say, we've been to a lot of dental conferences together, and one of the kind of common themes at any of these dental conferences is the amount of interest that the dentists show in wanting to speak to you because they're looking to get some of that, magic ingredient from your side of what is it going to take to get the ball moving on all sorts of different technology ideas, and people are throwing ideas at you. They're asking you what's your perspective on it because you build your own technology within your company, but you're also aware of all sorts of different technologies that's out in the space. And I feel safe in saying that there isn't much in the technology space in dentistry that you're not aware of and that you don't have a good grasp on how is this going to help or is this falling short. So when I see you at any sort of dental conference talking to clinical leaders, they're always listening pretty sharply.
Yeah, and I think that those clinical that the clinical leaders are the ones that really understand, for the most part, how to enhance the patient experience,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which is new. So, what other predictions do you have for the year 2024?
The things that I predict that are going to occur, I think, a lot of it's really wrapped around cloud adoption. I, as I look at different dental practices and how they're continuing to hold on to servers in their back closet somewhere and really maintain a hardware presence, an IT presence within the practice, even in the DSO side, it's time to start moving out to the cloud so you don't have to have all this equipment being run, maintained, failing within the individual dental practices and the DSO space. It's time to get onto the public cloud and really make it a much easier experience using software and different technology devices within the practice.
Yeah, that's yeah. I don't. I wonder what's that step going to be in 2024.
Well, the easy thing for me to say is practice management systems. You look at Planet DDS. I have a certainly affinity for it, and I think we've got a really good product in Denticon. But you look at all the different players in that space, and everybody's moving towards that. And we've talked about this 4 years ago.
Mhm.
Whoever ends up owning the cloud space for practice management system, that's it. It's going to be over. And I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but at the end of the day, it really ends up being something that is going to take a huge load off of that front end staff and just put it someplace where you can access it from anywhere on any device. And I think that really becomes important, because if the practice management system fails in the practice, it's kind of time to shut down.
Yeah, and I think, might not shock you, but I feel like 2023, the end of 2023 is kind of like the setting up the stage for AI to be 2024 to be the year of AI explosion. I feel like 2024, there's going to be this building momentum for interoperability and data accessibility, and 2025 is going to be the year of interoperability explosion, which
That
is
I,
very much it's not the exact same prediction,
no,
but
I
it's
agree.
similar.
I agree 100%. I think that it has been a crime in how little the industry has given access
You
to.
you could call it a disorder.
But I really do. I think you've got your data. That it's not the it's not the software company's data. It's the practice's data. It's the patient's data, and the data prison that everything's been historically put into has been really unfortunate. It really makes it very, very difficult for people to be able to share information, and that's really what IT is about moving information quickly and easily. And if you can't do that, you're falling short.
Yeah, and moving things to the cloud makes it more ubiquitous
Yep,
accessible, right?
100%.
Totally. Totally. Well, Dave, it's been amazing doing a podcast with you once again. It's
Thank you.
been far too long.
Yeah.
We must not take so much time in between this podcast and our next one.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always fun, of course.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, and see everybody next week right here on the Patient First podcast.